Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Salmons, Research Community Manager for Sage MethodSpace, and I'm pleased to be joined this morning by David and Oliver, who are going to talk about their article about computational literature reviews and how to conduct this kind of a study. But before we get started, if you are new to MethodSpace, this is a blog community focused on everything to do with designing, planning, conducting research, writing about it, sharing results in all different kinds of ways. And you can see that at the heart of this model, we have teaching and learning, because we think whether you are a brand new researcher or a very experienced researcher, we all have something to learn. And that's certainly why I enjoy doing these interviews, because I have the opportunity to talk with interesting people from all over the world who are contributing to this field. So why don't you begin by introducing yourselves? David?
Yeah, Janet, many thanks. So this is our paper about computational literature reviews, and this is joint work from Oliver, who's also here with us, and Christoph and Amol, who wrote that article with us. And Christoph is at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, and Amol is in Wake Forest. Oliver and I are located in Aachen, Germany. So we are a quite international team, and we've worked together in the past in many different projects, and in fact also in projects applying computational methods to review literature, which then in the end led us to the idea of writing such a method piece about conducting literature reviews supported by computational machine learning related methodology.
Oliver, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think what David said is absolutely correct. So what we're trying to do in this piece is really somewhat synthesizing our own struggles, right? And our own attempts, let's say, to deal with that emerging genre, and to define it, and to then hopefully guide a few others who are keen to apply computational literature reviews as a new method, right? So that was really our driving force. And the team altogether, as David said, is not just globally distributed, but also is sort of part of these struggles, right, of applying computational methods in lit reviews and different projects where we've applied this. And then we try to sort of take a step back and say, look, what were some of the hurdles? What are some of the principles that can guide us in this, and what can also be helpful, hopefully, for others?
So if you're watching this video, the paper is available to download, so you can take a look at it, especially since they'll be discussing some particular points from this paper. And this is part of a series related to a featured topic in the Organizational Research Methods Journal about rigorous and impactful literature reviews, where we're exploring all different styles and types and options for literature reviews. And certainly, a number of the people I've interviewed as a part of this series have talked about the issue we have, with such large bodies of literature now available, since we can use the electronic databases to access, such a wide range of journals across disciplines across the globe, that it's very different from the way that research was done not that long ago. But just to start with, for people who might be new to even thinking about this kind of approach, can you just give us a brief explanation to define what you mean by computational methods in this context?
Yeah, sure. So there are plenty of methods available nowadays with which researchers can summarize and, let's say summarize existing literature, like meta-analysis, bibliometric analysis, manual approaches, and most of them are supported by computers. So this is not what we per se see as a computational approach to literature reviews. What we think, or what we define and think of here, is that the computational approach or the computer plays a more, let's say, active or augmenting role in the review process, in that algorithms that we can apply help us and support us to not only collect, but also analyze the literature. And this is in most instances that we have in mind related to machine learning algorithms. And this was also the starting point of our journey into that space here. So when we started experimenting with some algorithms back in, let's say, 10, 12 years ago, we thought, okay, this could be a cool approach to try and summarize literature, large amounts of literatures, not only 100 articles, but thousands of articles. A number of articles that we, with other approaches, could not have analyzed as a whole, but we would usually just focus on a subset. And this was our starting point. And from that, we learned quite a lot how these processing capabilities of a computer, of certain algorithms, may support and augment what a human can do. And that and this is perhaps also the most important message of our article, that we think that the computer and the human should work somehow together, and vice versa, stimulate each other during this review process. And this is what we somehow see as the computational literature review approach that we introduce in this article here.
Well, I think it's interesting the way that you kind of separate out, distinguish the kind of human role versus the machine computer role, so that, you know, the people who may watch this, especially students who may be thinking, oh, good, you know, I'll let the computer do this job for me, that no, you still need the human part of it. So I appreciate, I think one of, you know, to me, you know, a value to the field is, you know, when researchers do what you've done here, of reflecting on, well, you know, what did you try? What did you learn? You know, how can others, you know, go about this, you know, so they have a place to start to think about their process. So we're going to refer to table 1 in the article. So if you're viewing this, you can pull that up and see it while they're talking about it. But here you lay out the 6-step process and distinguish at each stage kind of what the roles would be. So maybe you could just talk us through that a little bit, and, you know, how you determined these steps, and, you know, what's important to consider as someone is trying to use this approach.
Yeah, maybe just to, before we even start with that, I think, Janet, you mentioned a really important point. So what's the relative strength of the human and the machine in computational literature reviews, and how can we leverage that best? And I think initially, when you read about computational literature reviews, you might be really tempted, right? As a PhD student, as a researcher, you're saying, well, great, here's now an algorithm that can do the job for me. And I'm basically I'm basically just sitting back and relaxing and like, look, let's wait what the algorithm comes up with. And to be honest, David, I think initially when we explored this, I think we were also a little bit falling in this trap.
And hopeful, yes, somebody can do this job for me.
Exactly. Now, isn't that the solution to all our problems? And let's just sort of run the algorithm and then see what comes out of it. But I think the more you engage with that, the more you see that the algorithm per se is not doing the job, right? Even though they get better and better, and we'll be speaking about this, I think, also in the course of our little discussion, the human still needs to take a driver's seat. And that, I think, is important in all of this. And we distinguish essentially 2 ways of interacting between humans and the machine. And for one, algorithms can help automate human tasks, right? So that's the first way of interaction. So in literature reviews, there are sort of tedious tasks where humans reach their limits. For instance, reading thousands of articles or retrieving these articles, pre-processing them. So this is really where humans reach their limits. And in many areas of knowledge, we're now seeing a situation where we don't have hundreds of articles, but we have thousands or tens of thousands of articles. I think every year we get around about 2.5 or even more million new articles in peer-reviewed journals. And even in our field, right? We have tens of thousands of new articles. This is not feasible anymore to process by humans alone without computational aid. So machines can help us automate certain tasks, right? Not the thinking, right? But the pre-processing of text, the sort of identification of patterns in this. And then humans still keep as one of their main strengths, the creativity, ingenuity, the ability to assign meaning to these patterns. And so what we try to do in these 6 steps is to bring a bit of order into that method of computational literature review, but also be very specific of how the respective strength of humans and machines can be sort of leveraged and integrated. So that in the end, computational literature reviews are really some sort of application of what one might call hybrid intelligence. So machine intelligence from machine learning approaches and then human intelligence, and the two need to come together. And it's some sort of moving frontier also, because obviously humans become more intelligent, right, and more experienced, but also the algorithms, right, they develop at an amazing pace. So the whole genre is an evolving one, but the 6-step process, we feel, is something sort of that should be sort of a little bit timeless, right, and irrespective of the specific algorithms. And now, for instance, we could, if you like, talk our readers and listeners a little bit through these 6 processes and what our learnings are.
Okay. Right. So you begin with a conceptual goal. So, talk us through that. What, at this point, the role is primarily for the human. Human has to come up with the goal before they get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it sounds a bit sort of intuitive or trivial, but quite often one approaches maybe a literature review and a computational one by thinking, let's simply summarize the literature, right? Let's simply get everything we have and map it or whatever, right? But in the end of the day, it's very important what you want to add to the body of knowledge, right? Do you want to inspire the field by bringing up something new? Do you want to see connections between closely related fields? Do you want to sort of stimulate a critical debate on a topic? Do you want to sort of break down a literature stream into its different components? So in the end, it's very critical to start with, what do you actually want to get out of this? How do you want to add to literature? And for those who are interested in this, to really have the literature review process in general, right, but computational literature reviews in particular, be guided by conceptual goals. There we can point to one piece which we found very helpful in our work, right? And that's by McInnes in the Journal of Marketing. And she lays out 4 conceptual goals, namely envisioning, explicating, and relating and debating. And we found this to be very helpful also for our purposes of computational literature review. So the human needs to start by thinking, what do I actually want to do? What is my conceptual goal? How do I want to add to the body of knowledge? And once that's clarified, then the subsequent steps become a little bit easier to answer, because we have this sort of objective in mind. And I think one of our learnings was that quite often we start maybe with an objective, like let's simply summarize the literature or map it. But the more interesting computational literature reviews are those that pursue conceptual goals that go beyond summarizing, relating different literature streams, challenging some, finding connections among them, right? That's when things are getting really interesting. Because in the end of the day, one of our big messages was, and learnings was, the method alone is not doing the job. In the end, you need to answer the so what question, right?
Right.
What do you actually get out of it? What's your new insight? What's the knowledge you add to the community? And that all starts with step 1 of the process, right? Namely, what's our conceptual goal?
However, although it's step one, it's somehow also iterative, right?
Mhm.
So once you go through the process, you might go back, and based on what you learn out of the analysis, it might turn out that you perhaps need to refine your conceptual goal a little bit, or that you see opportunities also to pursue other goals. Although we are presenting this here in table 1 as a more or less straightforward 6 steps process, in real life, it's not that straight. It's more iterative, going back and forth a little bit.
Right. I could see how you might, as you know, perhaps once you start to understand this body of literature, what you've got to see, well, gee, there really are multiple points of view. We need to go into the debating piece, or, you know, we're seeing a theme around recommendations for future research. So we need to focus more on the envisioning option. So I think that that's a really good point. So then your next stage of operationalizing the process. So, you know, tell us a little bit more, like how would you do that? I mean, one of the things I would think would be, you know, how does this relate to, you know, coming up with your search process and, you know, finding the articles that you want to include in that corpus, or is that more part of step 1?
No, this is exactly what step 2 is all about, right? So it's about scoping your review, and it's again, it's the human more or less being in the driver's seat here, because the researcher, the scholar at hand, he or she needs to make decisions about the scope of the review, what should be included, which period should be included, which journals, or where are the boundaries of my review. And to be honest, I think this is not very different from any other review approach. You need to do that step always. However, in our case, when we want to analyze the full text of the literature, right? So it's not about analyzing just the references as we would do in a bibliometric study. So we are interested in the full text. So we need to retrieve all those texts from different databases. So here the computer can already support us. If we have an API to certain databases, we can use the machine already to automate to some degree this literature collection process. We can compile this into a database or into a complete data set, and already start preparing the texts for the analysis, because usually we download text as a PDF, right? So some journals support us with preparing HTML files or something else, so that you can directly work with the text printed in the article. But most journals, or in most cases, it's a PDF. So you first of all have to transform the PDF into a format that can be then analyzed with an algorithm. So that's then the role of the machine. And again, it's an interplay between the human and the machine, because we need to program or prepare a script or something like this that can do this. And it's again a back and forth between the human and the machine, and not only gathering all the articles, but also then preparing them for the next steps of the analysis.
I mean, one little thing to add in that regard is that also the human needs to be sort of involved in the sense of carefully looking at the downloads, at the maybe conversion of the documents. Did everything work appropriately? Were there systematic omissions? Were there some technical issues so that the translated or the transferred documents are already messed up, right? And in the end, the quality of the input text now to the following steps need to be ensured, and the human researcher has an important a role to play in that regard. I mean, in our experience, we had cases where certain text files were not converted appropriately, where certain types of documents were not downloaded, and sort of all these things need to be kept in mind, and that's the role of the human researcher in that step.
Right, right. So, is there also, I mean, I know from lots of experience with, obtaining articles from databases that sometimes, the title might be misleading and maybe it really doesn't even fit with what you're doing. It sounded good, but then when you look at it, you're like, no. So is that part of your, that process?
Yeah, absolutely, right? That's something one needs to double check at all times, right? Is actually what you're retrieving in line with your conceptual goals and the scope of your review, right? And sometimes you think you're on track, but then when you double check, you think that you realize that actually your search string or your selection criteria are not yet 100% on track.
Right.
Yeah.
So then the next stage, choosing the computational technique. So, what goes into that process?
Yeah, as I said already, we've prepared this here as a straightforward process. But what we already described is also a little bit ahead of this step here, because preparing the data for analysis, so pre-processing the data for analysis, depends on the choice of which computational technique you want to apply, right? So I just said that we need to transform the PDF into a machine-readable format, but this is only needed if you are interested in the text per se. And this means if you are interested in running an algorithm that can analyze the text, right? So these steps here are interconnected. So, but this third part of this process, let's not call it a step, but a part of the process, is that we need to define which technique we want to run, which we want to apply in order to come up with certain results. And there are tons and an abundance of different techniques that we could apply. So this is really important to determine the technique, so that you know what you need to do with your data in order to be able to run this specific technique. And this is again something that is really focused, or where the human is in the driver's seat again, because the machine doesn't make this decision, right? So this is a more or less entirely human-driven step then in this overall process.
And I think what's maybe worth adding in our understanding of computational literature reviews, we're really looking now at algorithms that analyze the text, right? So rather than the references or citations or whatever, right? So we're really interested in algorithms that help us analyze the text. And much is written in the article about this, but broadly speaking, we've got three classes of algorithms or categories of algorithms that we're considering. Unsupervised ones, and that's David, right? The category of algorithms that we've been applying a lot. And David has a lot of experience in LDA-based topic modeling. That's really what much of our experience is based on. But then we also distinguish not just between unsupervised techniques, but also supervised techniques and dictionary-based techniques. So three broad classes that in the end help us to understand or make sense, right? And detect patterns in the text per se. So that might be worth checking out. One learning from our experience, and that was a doctoral researcher who brought this to our group, is the importance of the data pre-processing. Because algorithms, right, can't just analyze the text per se, but they need to sort of convert the text into something that is analyzable. And there are lots of degrees of freedom, right, with regards to how you convert text into numbers that are then analyzable by an algorithm. And what we also learned from our experience is that the way you pre-process the data, right, the kind of words you eliminate, how you sort of transform the words, reduce them to their word stems, that matters greatly for the subsequent process of your textual analysis. So again, there's lots of degrees of freedom that the let's say intelligent user needs to be aware of and try to implement in a sensible way. David.
Yeah, completely right. And then this is then really also related to the fourth step then, because in the fourth step, we say, okay, now we need to perform the content analysis, which means that we need to convert the data, as Oliver just explained, and then run the analytical process and tool that we have chosen before. And part of this then is not only, that the human needs to tell the computer to run the algorithm and the machine runs it, but then it's a very interactive going back and forth between the preliminary results, checking the accuracy, plausibility, compatibility with our domain knowledge that we have, so that we can really get the most out of this analysis as possible. So this is a very iterative step then again, after not only preparing the data and running the algorithms. It's not only about running the algorithm again and to make it more fine-grained or more plausible, but this is especially in textual analysis also related to going back to the initial text and rethinking this pre-processing step, because the quality of the input data determines to a large degree the quality of the analysis and of the results and outputs. So it's a very iterative step, not only rerunning the analysis, but the whole approach of preparing the data and running the specific algorithm and checking all steps involved in here.
And you make the point in the table about managing trade-offs. So maybe could you explain that a little bit?
Sorry, could you repeat?
It was in this step 4, in the issues at that step, you described managing trade-offs between the individual review scope versus the computational resources and the time required. So the balancing of those priorities.
Yeah. So for one, it's about computer time and or computational processing time, but with better machines and more performant machines, this becomes less an issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, it's a matter of the amount of articles and the amount of text included in those articles. Not only how long it takes for the machine to process the algorithm, but also how diverse the results might be, how if you think about, let's say, for instance, an algorithm like a topic model, how many topics such a model extracts from the underlying text, and then you need to check the accuracy of the model, check the accuracy of the extracted topics, check whether this makes sense, and then you need to interpret all of this, right? So it's a matter of the variability of the underlying data set and the amount of data that you have that determines then the variability and the amount of results that you get. And then if you go back and forth between this, you have to check all of this and the quality of this again and again. And this then really becomes a trade-off between the amount and the size of the data set and the variability of the data set that you put in, and the amount of time that you need to run the PC and the computer, the algorithm, but also the amount of time that you need to make sense of all of this. So this is really a very large trade-off that we see and have experienced ourselves in the past and in our projects.
And I think it's really important, this trade-off, because it's tempting at first sight when you consider your first computational literature review to say, look, now I've got the algorithm, let's just include a huge body of literature, the algorithm will sort everything out, right? But in the end, what David said applies, right? If it's too diverse, your body of literature, then you might be running right into these trade-offs, and you might be getting far less out of your whole analysis than you might have hoped for. So these very careful thoughts about how diverse your landscape is that you want to review still applies, which also highlights now how the different steps are interrelated, right? Because that is actually something that we needed to consider already in the scoping stage, right? And sort of stage 2, when we said it's all about operationalizing your CLR. But where it's getting really interesting, I think, David, and where we struggled most, right? That's the step number 5. Because sort of, I mean, step 1, sometimes it's less implicit than explicit, but our learning was, look, step 1 needs to be made more explicit, but all the other steps can be seen as a little bit more mechanical, right? But step 5, this is really the so what question, right? What do we get out of all of this? And I mean, we've run computational literature reviews, and we've been sitting there and asking, look, now we can describe the topic structure, we can describe trends over time in topics. There are lots of things we can describe, but in the end, where's the excitement, right? Where's the novelty? Where is the insight that really drives the field forward? And so that's not what the machine is giving us, right? But that's really us sitting there and not just looking at the results, right, which can be nicely visualized with network graphs and many other ways, but it really also requires us to sort of go back to the articles, read the articles, some of them at least, right? Discuss that with others, take a step back, see connections, see where connections are missing, right? So the most interesting and the most painful sessions we had, and we had many of them, was to find out what is that telling us? How is that adding our body to the body of literature? And in our attempts to publish computational literature reviews, we had also quite a few experiences where the journals came back to us and said, look, great method, but in the end, so much effort for so little additional insight, right? And that really made us sort of work harder on this question, what's actually the insight? And it's tempting for those who want to jump into computational literature reviews to think it's all in the descriptive, right, in the end. But it's not, right? It's not the output per se, right, of the algorithm that is the contribution, but it is your interpretation and how you relate this to the existing body of knowledge. And it's also important to realize that computational literature reviews don't mean that you don't have to read. So you still have to read the articles yourself, because otherwise you can't make sense of all of this, right? You can't see the meaning in the patterns that the computer shows you.
Right.
You can be more efficient in that. You don't need to read all the 10,000s, but you need to know the field, right? And you need to do your own reading. David, that was really painful in many projects for us, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it's almost, I think, about mixed methods, because you've got this kind of, you might say almost like the qualitative side of trying to make sense, trying to understand, dig deeper, select the articles that you're going to really, look at more closely, etc. And so then, the presentation of findings is the last one of your steps. And I think you've touched on that a little bit in terms of being able to communicate the insights and not just the, oh, wow, look at what this cool algorithm generated, but what does it all mean? And how can you, explain that to somebody?
Yeah, exactly. So this is what Oliver already said. So the way how you analyze the output from the algorithm and try to make sense out of it and try to see what this really tells us is the first step towards the answer to the so what question. So why do we, or why should anybody read the review that we generated with this set of methods that we present here? But then the second part is the way how you present the findings, right? This really also gives an answer to the so what question. So what do we gain from these results, and what are the conclusions and implications that we draw from this? Do we end up with a future research agenda, good questions for future research? Do we end up with a theoretical model with a good categorization? And this is then again needs to be tied back to the initial goal that we had, right? So if we are eager to debate the current state of a field, then this would lead to a different set of implications in the end, right? That we try to develop. And if we just want to summarize, then that would also be a different kind of set of implications that we develop in the end of the article. And in our paper, we and this is perhaps something that we in a reiteration of this paper would update to some degree, because in this initial version of the paper, we thought that this step is again something where only the human is really involved, right? That the machine doesn't play a big role in that regard, but perhaps to some degree, this is nowadays, with the recent development in language models such as ChatGPT and so on, that the machine might also play a more active role in this last step of presenting the finding and presenting them in a way that they are compelling and informative to the reader.
So it seems like even with there, there'd be the interplay of the human effort of looking at what, perhaps if the language processing tool generates some description, well, now does that reflect what I, really want to focus on, and how does that tie to kind of answering my initial question, does it achieve the goal that I set out, from the beginning?
Yeah, absolutely. I think overall the message from our side is that computational literature reviews are a moving frontier, right? And to the extent to how humans and machines interact. We think that for the foreseeable future, humans should sit in the driver's seat in all of this, right? Setting the goals, scoping the review, calibrating the algorithms, checking, right, the results, and then most importantly, trying to extract meaning from this. But obviously, the better the algorithms become, the more they can support us also in those activities that require sort of creativity, human ingenuity, and the like. And that's maybe the exciting part of computational literature reviews, that we have now algorithms going forward, not just as a partner in these tedious tasks, right, but also in those that might support us in seeing meaning and seeing connections in all of this. And so we're very much excited about that genre of computational literature reviews, and also how this will develop going forward.
Well, thank you for taking the time to explain some of these ideas. I hope it will help our readers to gain more from the article that you've written. So thank you for participating in this, and we'll be interested to see how these options evolve as the tools change and the approaches get refined.
Yes, that's really interesting, and we are as well looking forward to this. And yeah, thanks for having us today, and have fun with our article.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.